So why was the United Nations Fourth World Conference on Women so important? In addition to the adoption of the Beijing Platform for Action and the Beijing Declaration, the NGO Forum was again a space for vibrant activism in action, amplifying the call for equality, development, and peace. So how will UN Women be supporting this process? UN Women is bringing together the next generation of women's rights activists with the gender equality advocates and visionaries who were instrumental in creating the Beijing Platform for Action more than 2 decades ago. Collectively, these change makers seek to tackle the unfinished business of empowering women through a new, groundbreaking, multi-generational campaign, Generation Equality, realizing women's rights for an equal future. The campaign demands equal pay, equal share of unpaid care and domestic work, an end to sexual harassment and violence against women and girls, healthcare services that respond to their needs, and their equal participation in political life and in decision-making in all areas of life. As part of the campaign, the Generation Equality Forum will take stock of progress and chart an agenda of concrete action to realize gender equality before 2030, kicking off in Mexico City, Mexico on the 7th and 8th of May 2020 and culminating in Paris, France on the 7th to the 10th of July 2020.
UN Women has a normative mandate, and of course the Beijing Platform for Action is a very important process that UN Women is following and supporting both for government and civil society, and it builds on that Fourth World Congress for Women, which was really pivotal. So when you're looking at gender equality, Beijing took that, I guess, to a new level in terms of measuring gender equality. And it's really up to both governments and civil society to support that process forward and continue to monitor our progress. So we're looking at quite an important process moving forward now, where we're moving to CSW 64 next year, and we're going to be presenting the findings, looking back from that original World Congress and measuring incrementally how gender equality has progressed throughout the years. Beijing is important because it's got 12 key pillars.
Yes.
So there's a lot more detail in terms of measuring gender equality than, say, in CEDAW or in other normative frameworks that guide our work. And I really personally feel that Beijing sets us up with a really clear baseline, both for where we've been in terms of gender equality and measuring progress forward, but also a baseline moving forward in the SDGs. So we're looking at next year being 2020, moving forward to 2030. We've got 1 decade to meet our SDG commitments, all of which, the detail of which really comes under the Beijing Platform for Action.
That's right. In terms of mainstreaming or getting gender equality into all those SDG goals.
The SDG Goal 5 is quite big. It's, it's a very, very big, broad outcome. What Beijing gives us is really the process towards achieving gender equality. So one of UN Women's pieces of work is supporting both governments in reporting and monitoring their gender equality commitments. So Beijing is an absolutely critical tool in doing that. And also civil society to advocate and to use Beijing and the results of the Beijing Platform for Action reporting process to advocate for greater gender equality progress.
Just on that, if I may, in terms of the country reports. So when we were at the Pacific Feminist Forum in May, we knew that a number of governments were working on their country reports or were getting around to it. Do you know what the situation is now, and how are you tracking that?
Yeah, so we've been supporting the different Pacific Island countries, either with technical support or a little bit of financial support. And I think we've got about 10 countries have submitted their reports. Kiribati is still pending. There are a few other countries still pending. But the majority of countries have either submitted or have a complete draft. And this is really critical because the next step forward is the regional meeting that's going to happen in Bangkok in November, where all of the Pacific Island governments, and hopefully working alongside their civil society counterparts, are going to come together with a critical sort of Pacific statement, as well as that combined Pacific report. And that will then move forward into CSW next year.
CSW next year will be a little different because there won't be a negotiated outcome.
That's right.
So tell us a little bit about what you know in terms of CSW 64 and also the Global Equality Forums that are planned for Paris and Mexico.
Yeah, so CSW next year will be focusing on the results of the Beijing Platform for Action. It will be that final accumulation, the global sort of I guess you would call it indicator set of what's happening in gender equality. And that will then feed into the Gender Forum, which really will be that prep for that last decade. How are we going to achieve the SDGs? And from what I understand, the reason for doing this, you've got Beijing as your, really more detailed pulse check on where we're at in terms of gender equality globally. And then what the big positions are. We've rolled back in a number of areas in terms of gender equality and specifically sexual and reproductive health rights, where we should be progressing forward. There hasn't been progress in other indicators. Other indicators have made okay progress. So we really need to have that analysis. And I think that's going to occur both at CSW next year, as well as at the Gender Equality Forum. And the Gender Equality Forum is going to be really a push towards the leadership. Why aren't we progressing in these areas? Why is there a rollback? And really looking at where's the low-hanging fruit? Where are things that we just need political will and leadership to get us moving ahead in gender equality? For example, in employment rights, maternity leave, things like that. Where there may be not such great political opposition, they may be things that are easier to progress. And then for the really difficult ones, what's our strategy? How are we going to, package that and push our leadership to really progress, for example, on sexual and reproductive health rights?
Like you mentioned earlier, Sandra, 2020 will give us a very clear 10-year plan in making sure that all these commitments, in particular with the SDGs, are aligned to these recommendations, the Beijing +25 report. For a woman in a country in Asia or in the Pacific who may not get to the Bangkok meeting or CSW or to the Gender Equality Forums in Mexico and Paris, what's your recommendation to her of how to stay engaged? What's your recommendation to young women of all diversities?
Well, I think the great thing about, having very active NGO alliances and social media campaigns, that we can participate even from a distance. I mean, most of us won't be going to those events, but that's fine. We can support our country counterparts who are going by making sure our voices are heard through social media, through joining coalitions and supplying those coalitions with real life stories about why these gender equality indicators matter and why, pushing back on the big pushback on rights for women matters. So I think all of us as women in our diversities around the globe need to participate. And again, it's through our coalitions, through social media, lobbying our government counterparts who we know are going to be at the table, lobbying our civil society reps who we know are going to be at the table, and making sure our stories get heard.
A lot going on this year and next year also. So what can we do? How can we organize? Here are some ideas. We can mobilize around the national NGO parallel reports, which can be presented to our governments. We can hold public events on the Beijing Platform for Action in CEDAW, in our schools and local communities, with women's clubs. Young feminists could create intergenerational and mentoring events. We could also produce our own NGO reports. We can contribute to online books such as My Memories and Messages for the Next Generation, which will be written by participants from the Fourth World Conference of Women in Beijing, and My Issues, Hopes and Dreams, which will be written by young women in the arts about the issues covered in the 12 critical areas of concern of the Beijing Platform for Action. You can also get involved in regional processes.